Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going on this absolutely wild journey, right? Where legendary myth crashes head-on into world-changing reality. We're going to unravel the true story of the high-voltage electrostatic generator. It's a real-life saga that involves one of history's most eccentric inventors, top-secret government investigations, and just a massive, game-changing leap in both physical and medical science. So let's dive right in. All right, I want you to picture this. It's January 1943. We're right in the thick of World War II. In a room on the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker, the legendary inventor Nikola Tesla has just died. And the United States government? Well, they are absolutely freaking out. Why? Because for years, Tesla had been teasing the press, claiming he had invented a teleforce weapon. The media dubbed it a death ray, and Tesla bragged it could shoot down airplanes from 250 miles away. Fearing these designs might somehow fall into the hands of the Axis powers, the FBI and the Office of Alien Property frantically swooped in and seized all his belongings. They desperately needed an expert to analyze his papers, and fast. Okay, let's dive into this, because the expert the government called in was an MIT professor and electrical engineer named John G. Trump. Now, after a super intense 3-day investigation into Tesla's secret notes, Trump issued a highly classified memo. And his ultimate assessment? Well, he basically said Tesla's late career ideas were mostly speculative. They simply did not include the new, sound, workable principles needed to actually build what he claimed. Now, to understand exactly why Trump was so incredibly certain and why the government trusted his expertise in the first place, we've got to step back and trace the real science of particle acceleration. So, let's get into Section 1, Chasing High Voltage. The timeline of this technology is honestly just mind-blowing. It all starts with Robert J. van de Graaff, a physicist who had this incredibly ambitious goal. He wanted to artificially split the atom. In 1929 at Princeton, he literally built a prototype high-voltage generator out of a tin can, a silk ribbon, and a tiny motor for less than $100. Talk about a humble beginning, right? But just 2 years later at MIT, he scales it up to a 3-foot sphere reaching 1,000,000 volts. By 1933, he's building this absolute monster of a machine, a 43-foot generator so insanely huge it had to be housed in an airship hangar at an estate called Round Hill, where it was shooting off dramatic artificial lightning. And yet, incredibly, by 1977, they had tamed this massive, chaotic energy enough to install it inside clinical hospitals for cancer treatment. So you're probably wondering, how does this whole setup actually work? It's surprisingly elegant, really. A Van de Graaff generator basically uses a moving belt, which, remember, started out as just a simple silk ribbon, to continuously, physically carry electrical charges up into a hollow metal sphere. Kind of like an escalator for electrons. Because the sphere is hollow, the charge naturally migrates to the outside, allowing the voltage to just build and build to massive megavolt levels. And the best part? It provided a steady, controllable stream of direct current. No pulsing, no flickering, which was exactly what scientists needed to precisely accelerate particles. Moving on to Section 2, Trump and Van de Graaff. Now, John G. Trump, and yes, as a fun historical side note, he actually was Donald Trump's uncle, arrived at MIT back in 1931 and became Van de Graaff's very first PhD student. While Van de Graaff was out there building these giant open-air lightning machines, Trump realized something crucial. To make this tech genuinely useful, they had to shrink it down. So he led the charge through 3 massive steps. First, he swapped the open-air models for vacuum insulation. Second, he used pressurized gases, like sulfur hexafluoride, to give it higher dielectric strength. Basically, he created an environment that completely stopped this massive electricity from randomly sparking and arcing all over the place. And third, he figured out that if he struck a gold target with this super steady electron beam, he could produce precise, highly penetrating X-rays. These two were an absolutely incredible team. In fact, their collaboration was so successful that after serving in World War II, they teamed up and co-founded the High Voltage Engineering Corporation in 1946. Backed by what was literally one of the world's very first modern venture capital friends, they moved out of a tiny Cambridge auto garage and grew into the largest global supplier of research particle accelerators. They weren't just researching anymore, they were literally mass-producing the future. Which brings us to Section 3, Evaluating Tesla's Papers. Now, what's really fascinating about this connection is that Tesla totally acknowledged his theoretical teleforce weapon was basically a modification of Van de Graaff's generator. Both concepts relied heavily on electrostatic fields to whip particles up to crazy high energies. But when John G. Trump looked at Tesla's designs in that hotel room, he immediately spotted the fatal flaws. Tesla was proposing an open-ended vacuum tube to just shoot particles out into the open air. Trump, who had literally spent the last decade painstakingly designing sealed, pressurized vacuums just to keep the high voltage from going haywire, knew for a fact that shooting a concentrated beam through the natural atmosphere over hundreds of miles was physically impossible. The energy would just disperse, so the death ray remained a myth, while MIT's controlled accelerators became reality. And there's just this profound, almost beautiful irony to the whole situation. James Melcher, one of Trump's colleagues at MIT, really hit the nail on the head here. The US government sent the world's absolute leading expert on high-voltage particle beams to find a weapon of mass destruction. But Trump, he had zero interest in building weapons. With the exact same underlying technology that inspired all those rumors of death rays, Trump dedicated his entire life to building tools for healing, for research, and for saving the environment. Let's wrap things up with Section 4, Real-World Megavolt Impact. Because the real-world footprint of the Van de Graaff generator, it's absolutely massive. We're talking major leaps in medical cancer treatment. We're talking industrial radiography, literally using X-rays to scan the thick steel hulls of Navy ships for microscopic defects. We're talking about providing the fundamental nuclear science required for the Manhattan Project. We're even talking about modern sewage treatment. Let's actually break a few of these down because it's super cool. So, the crucial point you should take away from this is how this tech completely revolutionized medicine. Before Trump and Van de Graaff, hospitals relied on radium, and radium was insanely expensive. Plus, it produced uncontrolled radiation that violently burned healthy skin. But these new HVC generators, they provided affordable, highly modulated 1 to 2 megavolt X-rays. Suddenly, doctors could precisely target deep-seated tumors while sparing the healthy organs around them. Trump even helped invent rotational therapy. That literally meant moving the patient in a full circle around the beam so the tumor stayed constantly in the crosshairs, while the entry dose of radiation was spread out safely. It was a total game changer. In fact, this technology was considered so vital that during World War II, it literally got drafted into military service. No joke. A massive 1.75 megavolt machine that Trump and Van de Graaff had built specifically to send to a hospital was straight up seized by the US Army. It was quickly diverted to support the urgent, top-secret nuclear cross-section measurements going on over at the Manhattan Project. But circling back to its medical legacy for a second, I want you to focus on this number, 500. To put that into perspective, for over 22 years, MIT operated a clinical cancer facility right there on its campus, using Trump's X-ray generator. More than 500 cancer patients every single year received life-saving radiotherapy right at the university. That is just incredible. And honestly, the innovation didn't stop there. Fast forward to the 1970s, the Clean Water Act mandates much better environmental protections, right? Well, Trump adopts these 2 megavolt accelerators for a completely new purpose. Instead of X-rays, they started firing raw electron beams directly into municipal wastewater and sludge. This instantly destroyed viruses, bacteria, and toxic chemical compounds like PCBs. So the core tech behind the dreaded death ray was instead zapping microscopic pathogens to keep our oceans and waterways safe. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about this. Tesla's unproven death ray captured the imagination of the entire world, right? It dominated the headlines, it sparked frantic FBI investigations. But the genuine, grounded physics pioneered by Van de Graaff and Trump, the rigorous, step-by-step engineering of these electrostatic generators, that is what actually changed the world. It accelerated modern physics, it cleaned up our environment, and it cured countless cancer patients. So I leave you with this question. Which is truly more powerful? A legendary weapon of war or a real machine that saved thousands of lives? Thanks so much for learning with me today, and keep questioning the science behind the stories.